It's life, and we can't get enough of this. This is it. What?
All right, live here at JPRG Radio. We have a few guests in the studio. We have Anthony Murphy and we have Russell Bruce.
Russ, welcome to the show, brother.
Hey, thanks for having me.
That's what's up. We're going to have a couple of Q&A situations here. We're going to ask some questions. Me and Russ were talking earlier about a post I made on Facebook about Native American Indians. So we're going to talk a little bit about that because a lot of people seem to be confused.
Our heritage.
Yes, that part. Go ahead, Russ.
Yeah, I'm not sure where you want to start. But
Well, let's start with the post that we had earlier. Like, some people were like really confused about that. They were kind of trying to say that American Indians, like the post was really a lie or something. Like, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of confusion with the terminology and also with historical narratives, right? Like, for example, you never said, or I never said Native American, but people throw that term up.
Right.
So if anybody would Google, Native American is a new term.
Right.
And it was actually subscribed to the Know Nothing Party, and this was in the 1900s,
Right.
where that term was first used. So when we're talking about an ancient people, we're not talking about Native Americans. And then you also would have to look at the history of the 5 civilized tribes, right? So when Columbus, he never came to North America, when they came to the islands and, DeSoto came to North America, these ancient people, they went by whatever their tribe name was, right? So most of the people in the Mississippi Valley region, like where your grandparents, my grandparents, so forth, you start looking in the Southeast, you had the Creek Indians. Like, for example, my grandmother and my great-grandmother, they all came from Muskogee County in Georgia. Muskogee was named after the tribe.
Right.
And most of these names, rivers, everything are ancient names named after these indigenous tribes who were here.
Correct.
So it's not so much making up things or catching sound bites off of TikTok. If you talk to your auntie, your grandparents, big mama, and ask them, did you come from Africa, or did our ancestors come from Africa, or were they always here?
They were always here.
And 95% of the time, you're going to get we were already here.
Right.
They don't know nothing about these stories. These stories are new.
Right.
And,
can I intervene?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
1 second. So I lived in Minnesota.
Yes, sir.
The states local to it was North Dakota, South Dakota, Oklahoma. So when you spoke about Native American people, don't get me wrong, that was interesting because the one thing that I know from living in Minnesota that the government pays tribal, yeah.
Yes, sir.
They're paying.
Yes,
so
sir.
You just struck a chord in me because, I have been looking at researching. So we're in the same Facebook group, long story short. But the question I have for you is why you said that the Native Americans is a new term. I've been hearing that term for years since I've been living in Minnesota.
Okay. Right. But you weren't here in 1865. You weren't here in 1700. So I challenge you to Google, when was the term Native American first used?
Okay.
It's new. So even when they created the 5 civilized tribes, right? Most people, they didn't teach us this stuff in school, right?
No.
So when the Europeans got here, there were thousands of tribes here. So, you got families, like all these little counties and so forth. They were tribes. So you had Choctaw, Creek, and then you had all these derivations of these different tribes. Like my queen's from Louisiana.
Correct.
They had a Takapa, they had the Opelousas Indians, they had all these, and you see Mardi Gras.
Yeah.
Where do you think they got that from?
Right. The colors, the flowers.
Where do you think Carnival in Trinidad, why are they wearing indigenous garb?
Right.
That didn't come from Europe. That was already here. It didn't come from Africa. It was here.
It's for some reason people think that the the Europeans encountered light-skinned Indians when they arrived on this land.
Yeah, that was the other question. Yeah.
So and they may have found some. I'm not going to say that everybody here was the exact same complexion.
Correct.
That would be a fallacy, right? But when you look at the descriptions, like what DeSoto encountered, right? So when he encountered Chief Tuscaloosa, he described him as a very tall black man, and some people go as far as saying he was 7 to 8 feet tall.
Wow. And where was this? Where was this?
Like where Alabama would be today.
Okay.
Tuscaloosa, Alabama,
Yeah.
named after Chief Tuscaloosa.
Tuscaloosa, okay, yeah.
And Tuscaloosa itself means black warrior.
Okay. Okay, there you go.
You see them?
All the signs are there, right?
Yeah, and then even before that, and you start looking, I challenge anybody right now to Google and look at the Bonampak murals in Mexico. Bonampak. And when you look at the Bonampak murals, you'll see dark-skinned indigenous people with dreadlocks.
Right.
These are the Mayans describing themselves.
Right.
Where did these people go?
Right.
And why are the Mayans today described as damn near white people?
Right. They've been whitewashed.
Or Mexicans. And then why are all these other indigenous tribes, especially the 5 civilized tribes, why are they depicted as very, very like non-pigmented people?
Right.
And their leaders, the attorneys and so forth that represent those tribes, they look nothing like the indigenous people. And here's where genealogy becomes very important, is when you start pulling these files, it's not hard to go back into the 1900s or 1865.
That's true.
You'll start to see that some of these people came from different parts of Asia, Japan.
Right.
They're from everywhere except for here.
Right.
And so, and this is not to slam all them, because you still have a situation with the Plains Indians.
Correct.
And I'm going to give you a little example, right? When you start looking at the Indian Removal Act, or what they refer to as the Trail of Tears, where they were moving our ancestors out of Georgia, Florida, Louisiana and everything, trying to get them to go to what they
To the
deemed
west.
Indian territory.
Right.
North.
Trail of Tears.
Yeah, which was Oklahoma, right?
Right.
Smack dab in the middle of this territory pops up Black Wall Street in Tulsa.
Right.
And if you look, Oklahoma was full of black towns that were thriving,
Absolutely.
totally independent, thriving. Tulsa at one point was producing more oil than Saudi Arabia.
So the reason to reclassify folks, I guess, is kind of obvious, right? Is to confuse us about who we were originally, and so we can't claim the land. I mean, that's what all this reclassification is really about, right? They shuffle us from Negro to this to that, just to detach us from what really is the goal, what our true origin is.
Right. And let's just say, if we're hypothetically speaking, say if all this is just a theory.
Mm-hmm.
If you were going to steal the land from a people, are you going to give them the true history of their people?
Of course not.
Especially when they were good record keepers, everything was well documented. Like, how did all of a sudden, when you do genealogy, you'll notice when you get close to about 1870 or so, a lot of the records are missing.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, all these municipal buildings, record buildings, all burned down simultaneously across the country, and even in parts of Europe at the same time.
Wow.
It was part of the greater cover-up, and it really starts. When the discovery of America. So they came here to take over, and that's what they did.
Exactly.
So.
And one more thing, Anthony, I'm not sure if I answer your question completely. So your question was about Native American. So they weren't referred to as Native American, and that's where part of the hijack comes from. So you have American Indian.
Okay.
Like, for example, you could look at the 1828 Noah Webster Dictionary, where they define what an American is. and it says the copper-colored people that were found here when the Europeans arrived.
Right.
And you pull out a copper-colored penny, you know, and who looks like the copper-colored penny, and those were the original people here in America, right? Now, whether they called them Indians, and here's one last thing on this, right? So, a lot of people say Columbus stumbled upon America. He was searching for India. India over in the East did not take on the name India until the 1940s. It was not called India in 1492. It was called Hindustan. And those people are Hindu.
The indigenous people.
They're called Hindu, not Indians. They even don't like to be called that.
Indian.
Right, but when you look here, the people in the islands where Columbus went, that's considered what? West Indies.
West Indies, yeah.
And when you look at the ancient maps, North America was referred to as India Superior.
Right. We're gonna
That's
take
why
a
they
break
call
right
them
there.
Indians.
We're gonna take a quick
That's
break.
good information.
And we're going to circle back with that and get some more out of Russ here. Now that we got him in the studio.
JPRG Radio.
That's what's up.
KI.
In between the grit and the dirt, listen to the mission, listen I do work as I crack up that monotone, chillin' up the jazz, so yo, get your own.
I could talk about that.
Okay.
All right. We're back with live here at JPRG Radio in Atlanta, Georgia. We have Russell Bruce in the studio and Anthony Murphy. We're going to continue our discussion on race and other topics as well.
Yes,
You guys are ready?
Yeah, we're ready, Russ. So let's dive a little bit deeper into the subject question that I had asked you earlier in regards. So what's the difference between the Southeast tribes and the tribes that I actually know about that exist in the northern Midwestern part of the country?
Like Black Hawk?
Yeah, the Black Hawk. Yeah, there's Cherokee in Minnesota and Black Hawk. You got me going right now, so I can't even remember the.
So like I said, there's thousands of tribes, and I'm not going to act like I'm an expert on all the tribes, but I could tell you that most of us, the so-called African Americans in this country, 90% of us, if not 95 or so, will trace their ancestry, their great-grandmama, their grandmama, great-great, whatever, came from the Southeast.
Let me. I gotta actually tell you something.
Yes, sir.
This is in a jokingly manner.
Okay.
I'm the darkest one in my family, and you just really picked me up a minute ago because everyone else is either your lady friend's complexion. We say the light skin origin. I'm just gonna put it to you.
Yes,
like
sir.
that. And I'm the only one that's darkest. So I had kind of questioned, why am I the only dark-skinned person in the family? Literally, almost to this point. My children picked up on my pigmentation. So can you dive into that a little bit?
Yeah, and I think that's going to be an individual case. So, like, are you referencing, like, even with your siblings?
Yes.
Do you all have the same father?
No.
Right. So that could also have something to do with it as well. But one of the things that you'll find is, and okay, we could jump into this part, right? So when you do your genealogy, you have 4 grandparents. You have 2 paternal, you have 2 maternal. And then if you start tracing those lines to see where they come from, they each had 2 parents. So by the time you get to, say, that 4th level or whatever, you might have about 128 great grandparents, right?
It's a big breakout.
So, and you start checking it out, right, where they come from. And here in this society right now, being that it's under a paternal order, you're taking the surname of the father. And so this is where you see a lot of foreigners who were coming into, say, the 13 colonies in the 1700s. You'll probably see one of your lines, like, what's your last name?
Murphy.
Murphy.
That's an Irish name.
Right. And I'm a Bruce, which is Irish. Very Irish.
I might be cousins.
Right. And see, the majority of black people or African Americans in this country have Irish names. So if you go back and you study the slave trade, when the slave trade kicked off, it was the Portuguese, the Spanish, and the French who were doing the enslavement. It wasn't the Irish. They were the ones that were getting enslaved and expelled, sent into the islands, into Virginia, into the Carolinas, Massachusetts, et cetera, right?
Right.
And that's where these names come from. So I could trace my Bruce lineage, which I share 4-time great-grandparents with Henry Louis Gates Jr.
That's awesome.
And,
okay.
Right. So Sarah and Joe Bruce in the mid-1700s in Virginia. So that's one of the reasons why a lot of these records are there. You'll start to see that a lot of these black and white Europeans were coming here. And one of the things that we don't hear a lot of is there were a lot of black people who came in early during the founding of the 13 colonies.
Exactly.
Including those who actually founded King James.
Okay, I have to actually interrupt you.
Yes, sir.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Russ that I know is an IT guy. So
You didn't
brother,
know this part of us. Huh?
Can you dive into a little bit of how you've gained this knowledge and, what prompted you or what got you into this historical
path?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's kind of weird, right? Janie and I always talk. I say that I was initiated. Like, it wasn't something that I was looking to get into, but I am by trade. I'm an engineer. I'm a chef on the side. Like, I do all kind of things. I could do multiple things well, right? And I think that's the genius of our people, is that we have this
Multiple skills.
Yeah, we have this multi-genius about us. But one of the things, like when I first came here to visit in 1988, I was living in Dallas, Texas, and one of the brothers I used to hang with, Big Lou, had moved here.
Yes.
He's
that's
from
my
New
brother.
York, but we met in Dallas. He had moved here prior to me moving. In 1988, I think they had just reopened the underground, right?
Yes, 88, yeah.
And
You got here in 88?
I came to visit.
Visit it, okay.
So, and there's a deep history about the riots, the race riots here. It burned down Atlanta, and it rose, the Phoenix or the Falcon rose about it ashes, right? So anyway, when it opened, I came to visit him, and we all go down there, and it was like a euphoric feeling where I had never been around that many black people at one time, and they weren't fighting.
Oh my gosh. Okay. You kind of got me on that one. So that was the highlight of my life 2 years ago. I moved to the South, right? So I took my best friend. We went down to Memphis to go to see the Tennessee State, Jackson State football game, the last game that Deion Sanders had coached with Jackson State. The most embarrassing part for me was I lived in Minnesota all those years. At that game, there was over 50,000 people. In my Kendrick Lamar voice, I saw 2 white people. Just 2 out of 50,000. So that was a significant impact on me, and then I started doing a little bit more research, as far as like, okay, it was my fault. I'm missing something here, But it goes back to, again, the takeover part. For me, I'm seeing, the historical information that you're providing me is I'm going home and doing some analysis.
Yeah, and so think about what you're saying, because it ties into it. So the second part of what I was saying, they weren't fighting, but I noticed that they were a whole bunch of students from Clark, Spelman, Morehouse.
Right.
So they were highly educated, and it was very civil. So I had this euphoric experience. I'm like, wow, so this is what Africa or Atlantis. Wakanda. Yeah, exactly. This is what it's at. You have all these highly skilled, highly educated people. And then there were conversations that Big Lou and our buddy Rob Scott was having.
Oh, yeah.
They're sitting there, they're talking about Elijah Muhammad.
Yes.
Noble Drew Ali.
Yes.
Marcus Garvey.
Well, see, we're from the same tribe. Me and Russ kind of hit the bricks at the same time. And I didn't mean to interrupt, but you brought up Lou. Not KIP Radio, really, if you think about it. If you listen to Lou's old messages in the 90s, this is what he said: knowledge is power, educate and re-educate the family. Remember that as the message?
All the time.
That's where I got it from, because it was always an uplift. I mean, just hearing him say that, I would get uplifted. I'm like, Lou was different. Him and Rob, they were related, and all 4 of us was really cool. And that's the beginning of my journey really started then.
Yeah. So after they had those conversations, and I really couldn't add nothing. I was waiting for them
Right.
to talk about like Abraham Lincoln, George Washington, like the stuff I learned in school, right?
I didn't know that. So wait. So where did you get the book at?
So
You know what the book is?
Okay, so check it out. Which one you talking about?
The Melanin book.
Okay, so check it out. So this is 1988, right?
Oh, okay,
so
88.
I leave. I go back to Dallas. Well, matter of fact, I was supposed to leave that Saturday night, like tonight. I was supposed to leave.
Right.
A big storm broke out because I rode down there with another good friend of mine, and a big storm broke out, and we're like, okay, we're gonna have to wait and go in the morning instead of leaving today, right?
Right.
So what did I do? So Lou, he had some books, and he gave me a cassette tape. This is when cassette tapes were still rocking.
Yeah.
Right? He gives me a cassette tape of Malcolm X.
Okay.
And I laid across the bed that evening, listened to that, and it set my soul on fire.
Wow.
And when I go back to Dallas, I had read everything I got my hands on. So the first 3 books, somebody stole some books off their daddy's shelf.
Yeah.
They gave me Soul on Ice by Eldridge Cleaver.
Okay.
What was it? Fire Next Time by James Baldwin.
Okay.
And Souls of Black Folks.
Okay. Those are the 3?
So those 3 books are the first 3 books I read. And after that, I literally would stay up, work nights, everything, 2, 3 in the morning, and read till I just fell asleep. That's why I have to wear these glasses now.
To this day, right?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So you're saying that at that point in time, you discovered our history, or not
The beginning,
our
I think.
history.
I think it led him on,
It's
lit his fire.
So yeah, it put me on fire, right? So for example, I went to college at Westminster College in Wilmington, Pennsylvania, which is a lily white school in an Amish Dutch.
I'm about to say it's Amish, yeah.
So you got a brother who grew up in the projects in Newcastle, Pennsylvania.
Shout out.
And now I'm at this very expensive, it was really like a small Ivy League type school. All
Right.
the professors were Ivy League professors.
Right.
And I think at best, in the 4 years I was there, we had probably 8 or 9 black people. I think those are most that was there.
Not surprised.
And I've had some weird experiences with people not really knowing how to take me that never been around
blacks, yeah.
So, and I could tell you some stories too.
Oh, I can tell you some stories too.
Yeah.
That's another segment.
Yeah. Yeah, but like I said, so that experience is what really set me on fire. And from there, it's evolution. So I jumped in different classrooms and, I studied different religions. And one of the things that I learned is each one has its limits, right? So,
Right.
So you could go to science class, but you still need physics,
Right.
and you still need astronomy, and you still need geography. So it's
I
like
heard you not mention the word history.
history, right? Well, history, right? So I'm more so into the mystery. History is his story.
Right.
That's what we were given.
Right.
The mystery is my story.
Okay,
Right.
so let me ask one
That's deep.
small, quite quaint question.
Yes, sir.
We'll do that, and then we'll go back to music after that.
Okay, so leading into the question, then we're going to go to the music. What's your perspective on mixing religion with the subject matter we're talking about? And then we'll get back to this.
That's a brilliant question, right?
Yeah.
So you want me to answer it or when we come back?
Let's go back to that. Let's come back to that. Let's start.
Okay.
Let's go. We're
Yeah,
gonna
keep
jump
that
into
thought,
some,
man.
some black sheep
I
here.
definitely want to tackle that one.
We're trying to get deep here on JPRG Radio today on a Saturday. This is KIP, Knowledge is Power. Your host, Kevin D. Lampkin. All right, we're going to jump into some more music here. All right.
Question about religion and, again, the discovery of America, as they say.
Yeah, so it's real interesting. It plays a major role in the founding of this country, right? So most people know Columbus came on his first voyage to Haiti, Puerto Rico, those islands. He had 4 voyages. First one's 1492. So when he goes back, he's like, hey, I found God's people. And he referred to these people as very, like, not so much docile, that they were very nice. They were greeting them with gifts and all this other stuff and wanting to feed and all that other stuff, right?
Right.
So he goes back, and then the Pope ends up creating what's called the doctrine of discovery. And because the Pope had all the power at that time.
Still does.
Because that's when religion ruled. So the Roman Catholic Church ruled. And you got to think, 1492, very pivotal, because the Moors ruled Spain from 1492 from 711 to 1492.
Correct.
Okay, so you spoke the word Moors. We could go deep dive into it, but the one thing that I'm just going to actually have you do right now is just give a 10-second spill about the Moors.
Okay, so the Moors, when you hear about it, that's a whole deeper story, right. But just to keep it over there, right? The Moors came up out of North Africa and conquered Europe. You look at a map, North Africa is like a rock's throw, say, from Spain and from Italy, especially Sicily. And that's why you'll see the people in Italy and Sicily have dark features, because the Moors had ruled there for damn near 1,000 years, right? And they were even there prior to that, but that's when they came in and pretty much took over. They came in with all the maritime science, like water systems, building castles,
civilized nations.
Right, yeah, they brought in, street lights, public baths, etc., right?
So the word Moor really just means black, and those people that migrated there had a nationality, but they were called Moors. And that's some confusion comes with that. I mean, the lineage of a Moor is what? Or is it, the terminology is used as a black person. So, are there specific nationality are those Africans that came up, are those the Moors and that's it?
So what Kevin's saying, so what he's meaning is slavery, which we're still, I just want to bring that up, the slave trade. Like when the slave ships that came to America, what was the difference between the Moors and those people that were indoctrinated as slaves?
So this is where it gets real interesting, right? So 1492, the Catholic Church finally defeats the Moors. And the Moors consisted of, a lot of people only think they were all Muslim, but they also consisted of Jews.
Right.
So you have Spain and Portugal, there were Muslim and Jews, and even some Christian, right? But predominantly Muslim and Jewish. So when the Roman Catholic Church defeats them, and Isabel and Ferdinand, within months, it was probably about 3 months, they send Columbus on a voyage to so-called discover new territory, right? They knew it was already here because the Moors were coming back and forth, getting sugar and so forth from Brazil, and they were getting cotton. They were already coming back and forth trading, and it set up posts. You study the history of Florida Keys, it's real deep, and the history of the pirates and all that.
I think Musa Mansa, his people was been coming over here on boats.
Right. So when you go back and you take a look at all these stories, right? Now all of a sudden they're being expelled. The Muslims and Jews are being expelled from Europe. All right. And where did they go? Some of them, some stayed, some went into France. Some came to America. So a lot of them came to America. So you start looking, you had all these mass migrations. So you start looking at the history of Mexico and Spanish Florida. Like Florida at one time stretched all the way over to Louisiana, which was considered West Florida.
Correct.
You see what I'm saying? And overnight it switched up when you have the sale of
the Louisiana Purchase.
Right, which was really only for the ports. And so,
right.
So
right.
That's where you got the story with the Washita Moors and all this other stuff, right?
Right.
So the history's deep. So, and the thing is, what people don't really realize is that these conquistadors who were on the ship with Columbus, his real name, by the way, was Salvador Zarco. It wasn't Columbus.
Right.
But if you really study the story deeply, he was a black Portuguese Jewish man, and let's say melanated.
Right.
Let's say melanated, and then also the majority of the people selling the ship and that were on the ship with him were Muslim and Jewish black people, like Juan Garrido, who was a conquistador. You can Google Juan Garrido and look that up. A lot of these people played major roles in their so-called doctrine of discovery, we'll call it. But that's where the word discovery of America came from, because it was under the doctrine of discovery of the Pope. And if you look recently, people could go online and Google, recently within the last year, the Pope has rescinded the doctrine of discovery.
Really?
Exactly. Wow. And that means a lot to our people and people around the world. And we're so busy, occupied with all the dancing and stuff that's going on in the media, and they keep throwing stuff at us, keeping us busy while
we don't even notice stuff
right.
like that.
I'm a Marine, so one thing we were always taught was the conversations and the things in radio and news is propaganda.
Yes, sir.
It's all propaganda.
Yes, sir. That's why shows like this are very important. That's why me and Janie have a podcast. Alternative media is going to be the thing of the future. And if
That's
you look
true.
right now,
That is
most
true.
people, the ratings and the number of viewers on your CNNs and Fox, ABC, all that stuff, they're going down because people are starting to wake up.
Right.
There's like this great awakening. People want to know the truth, and they're starting to see the propaganda, just from one channel to the other. You're getting two completely different stories, right?
At the same time.
So while I got you
Yes,
here,
sir.
let's talk a little bit about your platform.
Yes,
now
sir.
that I have you here, and tell the people about Matters of the Heart.
All right. So Janie and I, actually, it was Janie's baby that she birthed back in the day, Matters of the Heart and Soul podcast, and I was one of the early guests on her show, and we hit it off. And a few episodes later, she's seen that it works to have both a masculine and a feminine energy.
No brainer.
Because a lot of times, like you see these brothers out there talking about relationship, teaching women how to be women.
Right.
How the hell does a man teach a woman how to
Be
be
a
a woman?
woman. That's weird.
And then you have some women out there trying to teach a man how to be a man. So
Right.
we try to give everything we talk about, we give it from a feminine and a masculine aspect. And
Right.
it's because that's the way the brain works, right? Most men are left brain.
Left brain, women are
Women are right? So we try to do the hemiseek thing. It's just like when you listen to music, right? You listen to music with great lyrics, they say this is like the one time where both hemispheres of the brain
Merge.
automatically merge.
Yeah.
So when we do our podcast, we kind of try to give information from that same standpoint so that it hits home.
Okay.
Awesome.
That's good news.
So
Why don't you give the listeners the links either to your podcast, YouTube, Instagram?
Okay.
You know.
Yeah, you could find us on YouTube, Matters of the Heart and Soul podcast, and you'll see Janie, Charlotte, Russell, Bruce. That's us. We're the two hosts. Then also you could find us on Instagram, Matters of the Heart and Soul podcast, Facebook, same thing.
awesome.
Good.
So listen, we're going to jump back into some music here live at JPRG Radio. We got about another 15 minutes. I'm going to play a few songs, and then we'll close out with some conversation. So I hope everybody's been enjoying the show so far. We're trying to drop some knowledge on y'all. So let's listen to some music real quick.
Right.
All right, we're back. So we got one more talk session here live at JPRG Radio. Sorry for the little mix-up. We want to finish up our conversation with Russ today and Anthony. We're asking some questions. Guys, go ahead and cut into it.
Okay, Russ. So I had asked you in regards to religion and, again, how our people, not to say Jesus, but can you spark in on that conversation?
Yeah, so we were talking about the doctrine of discovery, how the Pope and the Catholic Church at first kind of chimed in on it, right? And so later you will find, like, even during the slave trade, is if they converted to Christianity, they kind of had a lot less harsh treatment than those who rebelled, right? So when you start looking at the Moors in Spain and France and the Jews, I'm talking about the melanated ones, right? They all start converting. So you start to see the Moors, they refer to them as Moriscos, or what do they call the ones that went down into Jamaica and up into the Maroons. So you start hearing all these different terms. So these were people who were originally Muslim who converted just to save face, right? Right. So you'll see that throughout South America, Cuba. You'll see people talking about Santeria and all this other stuff, right? So they'll profess Catholicism on the front end, but on the back end, they're really deep down inside where their heart is. Like, you have the Sephardic Jews or the crypto Jews.
Right.
So they couldn't go to a mosque or a synagogue and outwardly confess what they really believed in.
Of course.
They had to do that. So now you see these people coming into the Americas, into the 13 colonies, that, they're all appearing to be Christian in faith, but their background is Muslim and Jewish. And most of us, when we start tracing our bloodlines, we come from these bloodlines, right?
Right.
And even all the way up, and this is something that most people don't pay attention to, right? King James Version of the Bible, right? King James is the one who authorized the first charter for the colony of Virginia. So when the 13 colonies were established, it was King James who set it up.
Right.
This is the same king that wrote or authorized the King James Version of the Bible. So 1608 is the first charter. Then you have 1611 is the King James Version of the Bible. And you start reading the writings, they started having some issues with money because he set up the colony and they start bringing in people to mine for gold, to pick cotton,
right,
to do all these things to create money.
Create economies.
Right, and X amount of dollars, like say 25, 30% or whatever, went back to him. So King James was King James VI of Scotland, King James I of England. He's the one who united Scotland, England, Wales, and that's where you get the United Kingdom from, because they united them.
His brother.
And that's where Jamestown, Virginia, is named after King James.
Of course.
So all you preachers out there, know your history. King James, that wrote the King James Version of the Bible, is tied to history, and he was a melanated man.
I was just going to, he took the words out of my mouth. That was the caveat, right? And I was waiting for you to hit it, and he was black.
So when he dies, his son, King Charles I, takes over. That's where Charleston, all that, named after King Charles, another black.
What about Charlotte?
Charlotte's named after Queen Charlotte, who was the wife of King George III. So the state of Georgia was the 13th colony. So
right.
King Charles II, who was King James' son, his grandson, King Charles II. So 12 of the 13 colonies belong to them. They had like 3-4 states apiece. So you could go back, look at the charters. Right. Melanated men, right? And King George, who was their cousin, came out of Germany. So you got to start looking. You start studying his history. Germany, Spain, France, they were going in and out of these areas, right? Because, like, say, for example, my people, I'm a Bruce. Mm-hmm. So the history of the Bruces starts out, say, in Germany, and around 1500, you see the name Bruck, B-R-U-C-K. And you could Google it, you'll see a black coat of arms come up. So it starts in Germany.
Okay.
They migrate into France. Then it turns to, like, De Bruce or Bricks. And then later, during the Normandy Wars in 1099, they end up in Scotland. So this is where the line of these first black kings, well, it goes back to, what's my man's name? But this is where my bloodline comes from.
Right.
It comes from King James. And most of these melanated Bruces, when they're doing their DNA, you do your genealogy, it might cut off. Like mine cuts off in the 1700s, and this is when they were all coming into this area.
Right.
But the DNA of some of the relatives that are doing it are going back, showing these Scottish people come in. And I had some older relatives who knew that we had Scottish heritage. So these were black Scots that came in that were called Jacobites. So there was a big revolution in Scotland where they were being overthrown. So there were these constant Protestant and Catholic wars going on, right?
Yeah.
And so, like, say the Catholics win, they were expelling all the Protestants, and Protestants would be Muslims, Jews, whatever. They were all umbrellaed. If you were non-Catholic, they were umbrellaed right under the Protestant banner. So you'll see all these shit manifest. There's the Jacobite rebel shit manifest. You can look at the PDFs online. There's,
you sent me that.
There's one from, I think I did, 1715, 1745. It gives the description of the people they were shipping out. And it describes them as black, swarthy, brown, all melanated. Few pale people, 90% of them black. Then there's another book, The Virginia Colonial Soldiers, that I ordered that book. It describes these people who are fighting in the American Revolution. The majority of them were melanated. We don't get told that story.
So black people were fighting the Indians that came from England.
So
did y'all know that?
There you go. So, and it goes back to your question early, because it's like you had these black Europeans along with white Europeans coming here banging on the American Indian.
Right.
And some of them would marry into the bloodlines, and that's where the majority of us end up with all these Irish names.
Right.
A lot of it occurred, especially Virginia. If you're people from Virginia, North Carolina, you do your genealogy, you're going to see a lot of these intermarriages taking place, because during that time, the indigenous culture was more of a maternal line. So the land and everything was really being held in the woman's name. So the woman held it. So these foreigners were coming in trying to get close to the women to get the land.
Wow.
That's where the whole Pocahontas story and all that stuff.
Wow, okay.
Yeah.
Wow, what a great day of learning here at JPRG Radio. KIP, knowledge is power. Educate and re-educate the family. We've run out of time here today. I want to thank Russell for coming by, and hopefully he'll come by more and bring his lovely wife.
Anytime.
And we'll schedule something for both of you guys to come and talk. They got a number of topics they can cover, so we'll just have to strategize and see that's more important for our listeners. So that's it for me. Thanks, Anthony, for coming by.
Yeah, I'm always with you, brother.
All right, and I appreciate everybody. I'm about to sign off here, and we're going to wish everybody well.
Have a great weekend.
Peace.
Keep the stars.